We are reading The Road to Paris, and in chapter 2, we left Paris and Malcolm at their grandmother's front steps. Now we're going to find out what goes on with them and their grandmother in chapter 3. Short term. Paris stepped inside her grandmother's apartment, the sweat of her brow quickly drying in the fan-cooled living room. "All right," the grandmother said. "What are you two doing here?" Paris pushed past the question, leaving Malcolm to explain. "Grandma, can I have a glass of water?" she asked. Her grandmother nodded and waved her off to the kitchen. Paris ambled through the apartment with more than water on her mind. Her kitchen's table's big enough for 3 people, thought Paris. It's got 2 chairs now, but we could add one. The cabinet's full of dishes. I could help her wash them. I could even help cook sometimes. Water in hand, she went to the bedroom next. "That's a nice sized desk. I bet Malcolm and I could take turns doing our homework on it. When Grandma isn't using it herself, that is. The bed's not so big, but the couch opens up. I'm pretty sure it's big enough for 2. We could—" "Paris!" her grandmother called. "Get in here!" Paris hurried into the living room, slopping water as she went. She joined Malcolm on the sofa. "Yup, I was right," thought Paris. "This is plenty big enough for the 2 of us to sleep on." "Malcolm told me what happened," said her grandmother. "But what he didn't say was why you didn't call your mother." "Mother?" said Malcolm. "What mother?" Paris gave Malcolm a look. "She hasn't called us for a while," said Paris, "and we don't know where she is now." "Good God," said her grandmother. "Yeah, well, you know how she likes to move around," said Malcolm. "The longest the 3 of us ever stayed in one place was maybe 6 months." Paris waited for her grandmother to say something, but at first all she did was shake her head. Then she said, "Well, I guess you can stay here for a few days, but that's it. I've already raised my kids. I'm too old to start that all over again." "No sweat," said Malcolm, shrugging. Paris studied her grandmother's face, though. "What's the matter with Malcolm and me? Did we do something wrong? Is that why no one wants us?" The words never left Paris's lips, but somehow her grandmother seemed to hear them, and she looked away. Malcolm and Paris swallowed up the first day running errands for their grandmother, watching television, and wondering what terrible place they'd end up in next. The caseworker from the Administration for Children's Services had told the brother and sister they were lucky to be picked at all when they were placed with the Boones. There were few foster homes to go around, and fewer still willing to accept siblings. Paris did not feel especially lucky, but at least she and Malcolm had each other. That much she had learned to count on. When night fell, Paris's grandmother made up the couch for Malcolm and said Paris could sleep with her. Boys and girls should sleep separately, she said. That's silly, thought Paris. Malcolm's not a boy. He's my brother. Still, she went along with it. Paris was more tired than she knew. For 2 nights in a row, sleep rocked her like a baby and carried her to a place of dreamless rest. When she woke up the morning of the 3rd day, it was to the sound of her brother screaming, "No!" Paris rubbed her eyes and climbed out of bed to find her brother. Near the doorway, she found a tall, black stranger pulling Malcolm by the arm, while her grandmother just stood there, watching. Paris looked from Malcolm to the stranger to her grandmother. "What's going on?" asked Paris. "Go back to bed," said her grandmother. "Don't do this," said Malcolm, trying to pull away from the stranger. "Who's that man? And where is he taking my brother?" demanded Paris. "Calm down," said her grandmother. "He's from Children's Services. He knows what he's doing." Paris looked at her grandmother as if she were crazy, then darted to the door. Her grandmother caught her mid-flight and held her firmly. "You let my brother go!" Paris yelled. Malcolm struggled to free himself, but the caseworker held him fast, dragging him toward the elevator. "Malcolm!" cried Paris. "Don't leave me!" The elevator doors opened. "Don't worry," said Malcolm, tears streaming down his face. I'll be back for you, sis. I promise. The elevator doors closed while Paris screamed her brother's name one last time. Then he was gone. Paris felt her grandmother's grip loosen, and then, suddenly, weak-kneed, Paris collapsed in the doorway, sobbing. Her grandmother sighed. "I'm sorry, child," she said, "but the caseworker said they had to separate you two. There was nothing I could do about it." Her grandmother explained that Malcolm had been labeled incorrigible, whatever that meant. From what Paris could make out, it had something to do with the money he'd stolen from the Boones. Paris tried to explain what had happened, that Malcolm was trying to protect her, that he'd stolen the money so they could run away, but all her grandmother said was, "Your brother's gone, and that's the end of it." Paris wiped her tears away and balled up her fists. She found her grandmother in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee, and stared her down. "I hate you," Paris told her. "You hear me? I hate you." Her grandmother said nothing. Paris stomped to her grandmother's room and threw herself across the bed. Anger was her partner for the rest of the day. The next morning, Paris was on a platform to Penn Station, waiting for the train that would take her to her new foster home. Paris's heart beat so loudly, the noise filled her ears. For the first time, Malcolm's hand was not at her elbow to steady her. His arm was not across her shoulders to calm her. Her smile was not there to tell her, his smile was not there to tell her everything would be all right. The caseworker tried to hold her hand, but Paris snatched it back. She needed her hand to wipe away her tears. She'd never felt so alone in all her life. Sometimes I wish I was like my name, thought Paris, somewhere far away, out of reach, somewhere safe down south, or on the other side of the ocean. Instead, she was neither Paris nor Richmond. She felt like a nobody caught in the dark spaces in between, a nobody on her way to nowhere. The train rolled into the station, and she took one last look around before boarding, hoping to see her brother running to catch up. "Malcolm," Paris asked in the wind, "where are you?" Well, that is a pretty sad ending to chapter 3, but we hope that chapter 2 will find Paris in a better situation. I'm sorry, chapter 4 will find Paris in a better situation. So we're going to continue on this journey with Paris to find out where she ends up in her next foster home. So join me in chapter 4.